If you've been around Baltimore for long, you've probably heard of the idea of two cities, two Baltimores. There's the rich Baltimore and the poor Baltimore. There's white Baltimore and black Baltimore. And today we're going to look at one of the more notorious dividing lines between the two Baltimores, so you can see exactly what we're talking about if you're not familiar with it. The dividing line that we're going to look at today is Greenmount Avenue, which is also York Road as you get farther north. And the stark contrast between the west side and the east side of Greenmount Avenue is pretty shocking. Now, I'm no history major, so I'm not going to try to get into what causes what led to it. I'm not familiar with that enough to speak intelligently on it. But I'm just going to look at the present day situation, and towards the end of the video, I'm going to offer a couple ideas on how I think we could use these issues that have been issues for centuries. There's a silver lining, and I think there's solutions that could stem from what we are working with right now, if people would be willing to look at things a little bit different. So for starters, a basic geography lesson on Greenmount Avenue. It's a major north and south thoroughfare that runs basically right into the center of Baltimore. As you go north on Greenmount Avenue, it turns into York Road as you leave the city. And basically to the west of Greenmount Avenue is a very, very affluent, arguably the most affluent neighborhoods in the city of Baltimore. A lot of them have to do near Johns Hopkins University, Roland Park. A lot of these places have median incomes well over $100,000. They're overwhelmingly white. They're very highly educated. Then you go literally 2 blocks to the east of Greenmount Avenue, and it's a completely different story. To really illustrate this difference between the east side and the west side of Greenmount Avenue, I pulled up a Redfin page showing houses that are currently on the market. Now, to the west of Greenmount Avenue, this line right here is Greenmount Avenue. So to the west, you'll have houses that look like this, $1 million plus. Here's one for 1.5 million. Beautiful house, beautiful neighborhood, just a very, very affluent place to be. Then you go across to the east side where you're in Penn, Lucy, Waverly, some of these other neighborhoods, and all of a sudden it's 95,000, 35,000. I think I saw one, it was a 4-unit. Here's one, it's a 4-unit apartment for 160,000. So that just gives you an idea of how big the difference is. And we're only talking about, 3 blocks to go from $1 million to $50,000, $100,000. And, the fact that it's affordable housing isn't a bad thing, but the problem is the neighborhoods are just so incredibly different. To illustrate that a little bit further, I'm going to go ahead and pull up. I talked about life expectancy in couple of my last videos, but this line right here is Greenmount Avenue. You look to the left, the west side, and you have life expectancies in the mid 70s, upper 70s, into the 80s. You go, again, 2 blocks east, and you have life expectancies in the mid 70s down into the mid 60s. So you'll have, a 10-year difference between the east side and the west side, going from one neighborhood to another neighborhood that's only 3 blocks away. Another area where it's a shockingly stark contrast between the east and west of Greenmount Avenue is in violent crime. If you look at this map, and we focus in specifically on the Northern District, it's pretty easy to see where Greenmount Avenue is. It's incredibly stark, the difference between violent crime 2 blocks to the west of Greenmount Avenue and on Greenmount Avenue and eastward. So by now I feel like I've made my point about the differences between the east and west side of Greenmount Avenue. And for the record, there's several other dividing lines in the city of Baltimore that are equally as stark. One of them is Martin Luther King Boulevard on the west side of downtown. On the east side, near the north side of Patterson Park, there's another dividing line around Orleans Street that's similar, where you have 500, 600, $700,000 houses to one side of the street, and then you got, rough neighborhoods with all kinds of drug issues and crime issues. So the question is, what can be done about it? How do you bring the rougher neighborhoods up without negatively impacting the neighborhoods that are already affluent? And I think the big thing is a lot of people look at these dividing lines as, a problem and a sign of all these historic inequities, which is, I'm not going to argue with that. But to me, it seems like they're a perfect opportunity for focusing redevelopment efforts. If Greenmount Avenue were turned into a place that was safe, safe for everybody to go to, it was thriving. I mean, if you could draw people from both sides of it and make it a destination that people on both sides wanted to go to, that would be, go a long way in breaking down these barriers between the two neighborhoods. The problem is it doesn't seem like developers or people in the city of Baltimore are really see it this way. Development seems like it's pretty broken down to sort of solidify the different, there's basically the affluent waterfront developments that private developers do, and then there's the city-run, low-income housing type developments that are deeply into these neighborhoods that are pretty rough. But to me, it seems like the key would be to focus on these transitional spaces where you could conceivably break down the barriers. Now, right now, we're looking at a map of all the development projects that are in the works, and this kind of shows how little is being done to do what I'm saying, where you focus on the transitional spaces. Because you look at things like Port Covington, where you have these massive redevelopment projects down isolated on the waterfront, away from everywhere, 814 residences. You have Harbor Point on the other side of the inner harbor, where you have 500 units, parking, green spaces. And there's nothing wrong with those types of development projects. I mean, there's certainly a place for them. But the problem is when they start getting tax incentive financing, they start getting, the sweetheart deals with the city. And like Port Covington, for example, it's a great project. I have nothing against the project. But when you get $600 million in tax breaks for a project that's really only going to benefit the people that live there, that seems like kind of a misallocation of city and state resources. Whereas for a fraction of that, you could turn Greenmount Avenue into, with focused policing, with small scale grants and loans, with just putting some effort into making it a desirable place to go, you could turn Greenmount Avenue around for probably less than $600 million. So I guess my thoughts are that rather than these big, build a whole new city on the waterfront like it's shown in this picture, you could focus on small scale development in these transitional spaces like Greenmount Avenue, like Orleans Street, and make them a place where people from both sides of the street want to go to. Make it so it's safe enough that the soccer mom from Roland Park is comfortable bringing her kids there, and make it not so yuppie-ish that someone from Penn Lucy doesn't mind going there. So that's what I think about all that. Let me know what you think. If you think that big, large-scale projects away from everything are the way to go, or if small-scale, block-by-block, step-by-step type renovation, redevelopment projects would lead to a better outcome in the long run. Now, as it stands right now, generally the development projects that do happen are these large scale projects because financially it's difficult to make the money work on small scale projects. And to me, that's where the city could step in. I'm not generally a big advocate for the city giving tax breaks to anybody. I think everybody should be on a level playing field. But I think maybe in focus situations on specific areas, if you have a specific goal in mind for small scale development, I think the city can step in and make some of these projects that may be on the edge of being financially viable, if they can turn them in, offer some form of help to get these small scale projects moving. To me, that's what the city should be doing, and then let the private development feed off of that. Before I sign off, I want to say that looking back, I misspoke when I said tax incentive financing. It's actually tax increment financing that Port Covington got. The other thing is, I do recognize that it's not like the developers were handed $600 million. So I'm sure I'm going to get people calling me out on that. But they did get $600 million in tax increment financing, which is essentially where taxpayer money is used to build public infrastructure and things like that that will benefit the project in the long run. So it's still a sweetheart deal for the developer, but it's not as straightforward as here's $600 million cash to do whatever you want with. So I just want to clarify that so I don't have people calling me out on misrepresenting what TIF financing is. But anyways, that's it. If you have any thoughts on all this, let me know, comment, or share it with people who may be interested in this. And if you have any other Baltimore topics you want me to look into, I'd be happy to do so. So leave a comment about those.